Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of DefDave's 1984. I'm DefDave, and I am here to take you on a comprehensive chronological tour through every aspect of the best year ever. Yesterday, we were on January 23rd talking about Hulk Hogan's belt win over the Iron Sheik, and today we are flipping the calendar to January 24th, just one day later, just one day after the Bon Jovi self-titled debut LP came out and Hulk Hogan won the belt, both on the same day. The very next day, we turned the calendar and we're once again turning our attention to the world of comic books. It was a big year for comics, as I hope to bring to light over the course of this podcast series. But we'll be discussing one of the biggest reasons for that on today's episode, because on January 24th, we saw the publication of Secret Wars #1. This was a series that would last a full year and have impacts on so many books across the Marvel publishing line. And here to help me talk about it is none other than the Hulk cologne connoisseur himself, Mr. Joe Crowe.
Hello.
I will insert crowd applause here. Joe,
Yes,
how are
please.
you doing? How's it going, man?
I am tickled to death to be here to talk about this thing. I am at the moment not busy at this moment. So,
well, I do appreciate you coming all the way back to 1984 to spend time with me here. What I want to know is, how did you get here? What time travel technology or device did you use to find me here in 84?
here's what I did. Some dude left a DeLorean outside.
Okay. That happens a lot. Yeah.
And it was old and busted. I just started pushing buttons. I don't know. Here we go.
All right. You must have, that tells me you were probably speeding.
Yeah.
In the parking lot somewhere, but okay. Very good.
In Alabama, though, they don't catch you. So
there you go. So tell us all like a little bit about yourself and what kind of things you're into. What's your geek cred? What you got going on?
I dare say that I will put my geek cred up against any young men and women. I am the co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon, where we talk about and do panels and shows and contests and Q&As about just such things as you are doing with 1984. We start like 10, 15 years earlier than whatever the current day is. And then we go back to technically the entirety of recorded science fiction. So I've got a lot of time to kill, time to fill on Labor Day weekend at DragonCon every year. And then we do panels about that stuff throughout the year on the YouTube. And that's one of the things. The other thing is, on many weekends throughout the year around the Southeast, I'm a pro wrestling announcer. So just yesterday, Hulk Hogan beat Iron Sheik for the title. So I am still buzzing. I can't believe it happened. And Bob Backlund's going to get that rematch one day. Sidebar, he never does.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, DeLorean driver, for spoiling it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine that. We see Hulk Hogan win his first WWF title, and the very next day, you're going to the comic shop and you're picking up Secret Wars #1. How awesome is 1984?
As you and I have discussed many, many times in our Avengers discussions and fandom and such as that, I like the more superheroes, the better.
Yes.
I'm not just a solo title guy. I don't think I've ever collected a solo title, but I'm all about team up, 2-in-1, Marvel team up, Marvel 2-in-1, Avengers, Defenders, and Secret Wars promised to be the biggest of all the things.
Absolutely.
So I was all in from day one.
That is awesome. Yep, I was right there with you. So before we get too far into it, though, let me ask you this. We can kind of set the table for everybody. What was your 1984 like? Like, how old were you? Where were you? What were you into?
I was, let's see, in January, I was still the tender age of 13.
Okay.
And I grew up in Clanton, Alabama, the heart of Dixie. And I say that that was a sign that used to hang over one of the stoplights in town. And it's the middle of the state. And peaches are our famous export. We have, much like there's some other town, I think in South Carolina, we've got a water tower shaped like a human butt, but then they painted it to look like a peach. So we have that going for us. And
That
at
is a
four,
real thing. I've driven past that exit many times.
yes,
That is a real thing.
and um, so when I was 13 in January of '84, I was in, I'm guessing eighth grade, ninth grade,
Yeah, I
eighth.
think you're a year ahead of me. You would have been in eighth, I think.
There you go. Okay, good. January, yeah.
Yeah.
So eighth grade, as every other 14, 13, 14 year old at that time period, it was emotional hell. and, uh, but so I barely survived. I mean, stuff was happening. I was 13, 14.
If you had an adamantium skeleton, you were probably okay,
Sure,
or a healing factor.
or that.
Yes, but I don't know about you. I didn't
Otherwise,
have any of those things going on.
nope, 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 nope. But my family, my dad was a veterinarian, and my whole family worked on our horse ranch. So in the afternoons, before I could watch my GI Joe and He Man and read my stuff, I had to feed horses. So that was what I did for what seemed like hours every night. And you didn't finish at any point, you just stopped. And then you're like, I think that'll do for today. And then I could go to the house and recoup.
I gotcha. So I want to recap this for you. We're in the middle of an amazing stretch in January, and I've already done this in the last couple episodes, but I'm going to give this to you because you probably don't have it in your head.
Mm-mm.
So January 24th, we're on a Tuesday right here. Okay,
Nope.
Friday was the 20th. We got a Judas Priest album and the World Series premiere of The Master with Lee Van Cleef on that
Oh,
Friday.
nice.
Saturday, Owner of a Lonely Heart hits number one on the charts. Sunday, I turned 13. Super Bowl 18 takes place. And immediately after the Super Bowl, the world premiere of Airwolf.
Oh my God.
And then you
just
wake up
vibration. We're just buzzing right now.
and you wake up Monday morning and there's a new Bon Jovi album on at the stores, and that night Hulk Hogan wins the belt. And you get up Tuesday morning and Secret Wars number one is at your favorite comic shop.
Wow. If you had a comic shop anywhere near
Yes.
where you live, because I did not.
Well, I think peach-shaped water towers and comic book shops are mutually exclusive. I don't think
Yeah.
there's not an overlapping area in that Venn diagram.
No, 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 no. There is not. A trip to one of the big cities was required for a comic book shop. And occasionally they would pop up at drugstores in town, like your Harco, your Big B's.
Mhm.
And that was my usual spot to pick up comics. And that is where I got Secret Wars number one.
Oh, good. Okay. I was wondering if Secret Wars was a direct market only event, but you're telling me you picked it up at the newsstand then.
I feel like I must have, yeah.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, why don't we get into it? So let's jump in. Secret Wars. Everybody's heard the term now because it's going to be the name of a movie, or at least it was going to be the name of a movie. I don't know if they've stuck with that plan or not, but we're talking about 1984 Marvel superheroes Secret Wars. What the heck is it? What is it? What's the high concept? What's this book about?
Okay. I before this, before Secret Wars, there had never been a multi-title, continuity-wide crossover. This was the very first one, and we'll get into how successful that was, and I have stern opinions, Roger
Okay.
Stern opinions, about that kind of thing. But this was unheralded. Nobody had done or attempted anything like this before. I mean, there've been titles that Captain America would cross over to Iron Man, FF would meet the Avengers, back and forth, but it was never to this level. And that was the promise. And the promise also was the ultimate battleground and the ultimate fight between the good guys and the bad guys, and stuff was going to happen. And who knows, what would transpire from the end of the series. And so it was like everything was on the table. Nobody had any idea what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from the cover of issue number 1, you're getting all of the Avengers, you're getting all of the X-Men, you're getting all of the Fantastic Four, and you're getting solo heroes like Spider-Man and Hulk. You're basically getting every significant character in Marvel. At least you have every significant super team represented. It
Mhm.
was just a smorgasbord of characters. Like we never had this. Now there was the Contest of Champions, which lasted 3 issues,
Yeah.
and it was very self-contained, and it didn't really have ramifications on the rest of Marvel's books.
I
This
totally forgot until you just said it about Contest of Champions, and I dug the heck out of that because that had in the back, for the first time ever in any print that I had seen, lists of heroes and characters,
Oh yeah.
and just A to Z in little paragraphs. People you've never heard of for like 12 pages.
Yeah, it debuted a bunch of new characters, yeah.
Yeah,
But
a bunch
Secret
of whom
Wars,
never appeared again.
that's true. But Secret Wars was different because it did have bigger ramifications,
Yeah,
and it was a bigger story, and we'll get into this in just a minute, I'm sure. It was written by the boss, like,
yeah.
the guy, the editor-in-chief of Marvel. He was writing all of Marvel's characters. It just
Mhm.
seemed like it was something very, very special. So tell us a little bit more, like, give us the broad strokes of the story here. Give us like the 30-second version.
30-second version is the heroes in various titles throughout the months disappear. There's a big structure in the middle of Central Park. They all vanish. Nobody knows where they went. And that when they pop in Secret Wars number 1, they are in a little spaceship floating above a planet. They discover, oh, the villains. Some villains are in another ship, and Galactus is there. Every A-lister,
Doctor
big timer,
Doom,
main
Ultron.
eventer
Yeah.
that you've seen in Marvel Comics, they're all in there. And so they're like, well, what should we do? And they decide, well, I think we probably should fight each other. And as they are wont to do, and then old Mr. Beyonder shows up for the first time, and it's just, if I'm remembering right, it's just words on a panel. You don't see a physical form, and he says, defeat your enemies. I don't know the exact quote off the top of my head, and anything you desire will be yours, which powerful motivation, especially for somebody like a Dr. Doom who, after hearing that, probably goes, wait, I like everything. I'd like that to be mine. Sure. So I'm in, says Dr. Doom. And so they and then hijinks ensue.
Yeah, so it was really exciting. You got to see all the heroes and all the villains all together in one story. And what happened in the regular books, like you said, in all these books that are connected across the publishing line, the characters enter this device and like teleport away. And by the end of that same issue, or maybe the very next issue, they come back. And because those books had to keep publishing every month all year
That
long,
is what, yeah.
right? And so every book across the line had a time jump in it. And suddenly there are changes in these books that we don't understand how they got there.
Hmm.
And then meanwhile, Secret Wars spends the next 12 months rolling out its issues in which all of those things get explained. And so for me, that made it feel like this was an absolute critical series. You had to read it because it answered so many questions of what was happening, that explained all these time jump mysteries across the entire line.
I have the devil's advocate, the son of Satan's advocate response to that, but we can pause that and keep going. But in my experience with it, the when they all came back, it was kind of anticlimactic because we know Hulk didn't die. We know this guy didn't die and that guy didn't die. Now, again, like you said, somehow something was powerful enough to break the Hulk's leg. I think that was what happened with him. And so that was something to look forward to, and to figure out. And Spider-Man's black costume was not explained for 8 months
Right.
because we didn't know anything. Because Secret Wars number 8, which I believe you'll be covering later
Eventually.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. So what happened in January, I think it was issue 252, Amazing Spider-Man. Suddenly Spider-Man's wearing a black costume. You're like,
what?
what just happened?
Mhm.
So in terms of real world publishing, the first appearance of the black costume is this same month of January.
Yeah,
But in continuity, in terms of like when it happened for the characters, we're not going to see that moment for another 8 months for when Secret
eight
Wars number
months.
8 comes out.
There was no. I know today, let's just do one every 2 weeks, or let's do a weekly thing
Yeah.
because we're insane. Back then, it was at least 4 weeks between everything.
Right.
And so we had to wait. We didn't know what was going to happen. But my biggest beef was the lead time with like, and now I appreciate why they did it. Everybody disappeared in the same month, and then we find out where they went in the same month or the next month. And I feel like had they disappeared early and then had time to play out the missing time instead of boom, now they're back.
Right.
I felt like that would have been because a lot of the titles did interesting stuff in the issue or two that they showed the characters are missing. I think Black Cat went looking for Spider-Man, if I'm remembering right, and nobody knew where he was. Well, nobody knew where anybody was,
Right.
and so
And
that was it was it was clever and neat because, like you said, we're not going to find out what happened to any of these guys for months.
right. And on a team book like Avengers, you could just rotate in some new characters to make up the roster and you can play out the mystery in real time.
Yeah,
But with a solo book, well, that book still needs its character every month.
yeah,
And Spider-Man's in like 4 different books
yeah.
every
I
month.
don't
I mean,
remember how they did it for.
you just, so
I,
they
I,
couldn't, so I think you alluded to a little bit, I, I don't know what your final assessment is of this series. I understand the cynical view of this because of
yeah,
the reasons behind its creation. But the reality is 13-year-old David ate this stuff up and absolutely loved it. And I still love it. But why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit like what was going on behind the scenes that that led to Marvel arriving to this moment of even doing this series? What was going on and why does that turn off a lot of people?
like you alluded to, you have a choice. You can just be a nerd and a geek like you were when you first read the stuff, which
Hmm.
is what I do, and I think that's what you do. And
Hmm.
I feel the same way as you. This is just a cool thing from when I was 13, and it's still rereadable. All 12 issues. And I love that. Periodically they'll revisit this kind of thing in other comics because the people making comics now are our age, so they did the same stuff that we did. But anyways, I the and again, like you, we didn't have the internet yet, but we had Starlog magazine, and like probably there were comics magazines like Amazing Heroes and Comic Scene. So we got the preview stuff. We knew what was coming. We were prepared, you know. And the background to Secret Wars happening was commercial. And again, I don't mind being commercialized. I'm in. You know, if you said this G.I. Joe comic book is tied in with a G.I. Joe cartoon, well, give me both.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and I and exactly. And oh, this commercial is about He-Man action figures. I'll have those too. Thank you. And yeah, and you know, and the same thing. And Marvel wanted and you know, Star Wars figures were still a thing, but Marvel wanted a piece of that themselves because as big as they kind of were at the time, well, they're big to an extent. They were like, we got to get some of that merchandise money. We got to get in the toy shelves with He-Man and G.I. Joe. There it is. And they at first attempted to call it something like Cosmic Champions. And
Yeah.
the kids that they tested it on were like, what is that? So they literally used two buzzwords that sparked interest in the kid test audiences: secret and wars. And that's where the title came from.
From like grade school aged focus
Yeah,
groups. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Which, but you know, it works. It's a better name. I mean,
yeah, it is.
I still like it. Yeah. So an interesting thing that was happening in '84 that I'll be covering later in the series is there was a bit of a superhero action figure uh, battle going on between Kenner
Yeah,
and Mattel, because at this point I haven't been able to nail down the exact dates of release, but here we are early in January, and obviously this had been in development in '83. Kenner had acquired the license to do DC Comics action figures, and that would come to market eventually as the Superpowers collection,
yes.
right? And everybody remembers that, and I'm planning on doing an episode on those.
Mm,
And they were able to tie that line into a revamp of the Super Friends cartoon that was still going on the
yeah,
air at the time. And Mattel didn't want to be left out of that business. So they realized they're looking across town and Kenner's got DC. Mattel makes a move for Marvel. Now,
yeah,
they wanted to do they wanted to do these characters, these action figures, and but what they didn't have was a story to connect it. Like He-Man toy line is being driven by the cartoon.
yeah,
G.I. Joe toy line is being driven by the cartoon and the comics. And it kind of all goes back to Star Wars because
yeah.
it comes down to the idea of a story, a storytelling driving interest in the action figures. And Mattel told Marvel, we need a storyline for us to do this line of toys. And
Yep.
it's purely out of, like you said, Mattel's desire to hit the market with toys that led to this. It's just it came out. It's easy to look at this very cynical, right? Like
Sure.
it didn't come from a creative impulse. It came from a commercial and marketing mandate.
But you know what? It worked on us.
It sure did. I had
It did the job.
it totally worked. I mean, it had me hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this image I have right now on the screen, and I can tell just now. I should have noticed it earlier when I was prepping for the show. This is not a 1984 edition of
I think this
the
is like the nostalgia, like
it's the
they did a new line of the Secret
yeah,
Wars figures.
yeah, retro
'Cause
packaging. And
'cause
this
there's a
is
zillion now that's one of the
that's an
original.
84, yeah.
'Cause that
And
guy I had.
now this is what I was going to say. I had the Captain America figure, and I was happy with him because he's supposed to have a shield.
Yep.
And Mattel decided to give every character a shield.
And
And
at no point did those shields come into play in
no,
our story.
we never saw them. No.
Nope.
Like
And
like
also,
Daredevil, they gave Daredevil a shield in the toys. They
yeah,
gave Doctor Doom a shield. I
and
was
there
like,
were figures okay. I'm very spoiled in, as we all are, in years recent. Much like with the Star Wars guys, I'm super jealous of them because every character that appeared on screen got a figure. Everyone. And Secret Wars, I believe, had a total of what, 9, 10 figures?
Yeah,
There's like 60,000 Marvel figures,
right.
Marvel characters.
Characters.
So we got 10,
And
and it was not enough. They didn't even do the entirety of the cast
of
of the comic.
I think there was a wave of figures never that never came to market. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know what happened
Oh,
there, but
and yes, I remember that now because um, Daredevil was supposed to be in the
the
Secret
final
Wars
wave.
comic
Yeah.
because they had made a figure, and then when he wasn't in the comic, they either, I don't know which one begat the other, but either they didn't put out the figure because he wasn't in the comic, or they didn't put him in the comic because they didn't put out the figure. I don't know, but still, they didn't put out enough figures. I only got a few of them. I think I had Kang and I had Iron Man because I had to focus on my Avengers continuity. I
There you
guess.
go. Did you have whatever this is with Doom Base or whatever? I
I
mean,
wish, because
man,
it looks it looks cool, and it also looks like a boombox on its side.
maybe it's a Decepticon,
Yeah,
disguised as a boombox and villain headquarters. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, maybe fans that were older than 13 and 84
yeah.
had a
Who
problem
had
with all this.
money?
I mean, you could look at it and go, "Oh, it was driven by Mattel. Oh, it was only about toys." The story is like bending itself around just to try to work these toy connections in. Or you can look at it like a 13-year-old and go, "Holy crap, this is the coolest thing ever."
Yeah. There are, in this 12-issue series, moments and um, bits and pieces that are, in my opinion, remain iconic, you know, all these decades later. Not in this very first issue exactly, except, well, we'll talk about it. But there's some stuff in the first issue, but this thing holds up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to call up an image right now. I'm going to show it to you in just a second. Um, give me just a second here. As the momentum screeches to a halt. But to your but to your point, uh, for example, there is
There
the
it is.
this is probably the most valuable uh, collector's item out of this series because this is the in continuity first appearance of that costume, which we would find out later at the hands of other writers is actually alive and actually basically becomes Venom.
Yeah. Everybody who's like, boy, Venom sure is cool. Man, we were there at the beginning.
Yeah.
We were.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about,
Don't
yeah.
talk to me about your Venom.
Yeah. Don't come at me with your movie origins of Venom. Let me tell you how he really got the costume.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of big moments in future issues, can we talk about this one? I mean,
That's the one I was going to talk about.
tell
That's
it
the
what's
exact one.
this is issue number 4. Tell us what's happening here. This made such a huge impression on me when I read this.
So the villains, because they're not cool, they're not nice people.
They're not nice.
Oh gosh, I wish I remember who did it. They threw a mountain at the good guys.
It was for all I know, it was the Molecule Man. So I
It
don't
may
know.
have been,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of stuff going on with the they threw a mountain at the heroes, and it landed atop of them, but Mr. Bruce Banner caught it
Yes.
and was like, I got you.
The
And
Hulk. Yeah.
I remember the other strong heroes are under there too, and they helped a little bit, but Hulk had to balance it. Like, he had to get under it. He had to. I mean, I can make up weightlifting terms if you would like, but he was in there, and
Yes.
at the time, Hulk had Bruce Banner's intelligence. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, he was taller.
And but having to hold up 150 billion tons, it wasn't doing him right. It was he was turning into the old him. He was gradually going um angrier, as he is known for doing, because he had to hold up a mountain.
Well, yeah, he was holding up a mountain, and I think it was Reed Richards, antagonized him and made him angry on purpose.
Yeah,
In
that's
order
it.
in order for them to escape from underneath this mountain. That was like the coolest thing ever as far as I was
Yeah,
concerned. Like it when I the standout issues for me were Secret Wars is issue number 1, number 4, and number 8.
yeah.
Um so and I really so where do you land? Like what's your impression? Do you come away thinking this was awesome, or are you looking at it more like, well, this is kind of crass commercialism?
Oh, awesome. I think I'll always fall on the side of awesomeness versus, I mean, isn't everything commercialism?
Yeah, I mean, they are in the business of selling comic books.
I want, and they are in the business of selling them, and I'm in the business of buying them.
Exactly.
If you want to aim something in my direction, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. And, Secret Wars was basically on the front page of issue 1 said, Joe, buy this. Dave, buy this.
Yeah, exactly. And we're getting like Doctor Doom. When you said at the beginning, the Beyonder lays it out, told the villains you can get anything you want. Well, Doctor Doom decides he wants the Beyonder's power. Like he goes after the
And
Beyonder.
so Beyonder's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
What?
whoa.
Let's don't get
No, no,
crazy here.
no takesy backsies. That's not what I.
It was so great, and to me, Jim Shooter was the editor in chief. He had written the Avengers, and here he is writing all of the Marvel heroes. The fact that it was the editor in chief writing it, that it involved all these teams and all these characters, and it was having all these impacts on other books, it just seemed like the center of the comic book world. This is something I absolutely had to have.
Yeah.
So, as I guess, kind of wrapping this up, rounding third here, let's zoom out a little bit and let's just talk about like what was the impact or the influence of this series, like I'm looking at it from the real world publishing sense of it, on the comic book business. Like what did it change the business?
It certainly led creatively to everybody trying to do it again.
Mm,
Not just Marvel, but also it told DC, hey, get on this.
yeah.
And they did with Crisis on Infinite Earths. And there were no action figures for that, though. Uh, and I, if I'm not mistaken, it sold, I dare say, pretty well.
Yeah, I didn't get an exact number, but it did. What I read today said that it sold better than any comic of the previous 25 years.
And unlike a lot of, like, as the years progress, it stayed in print.
Yes.
They once the if I graphic novels and collections were not a thing yet, but
Right.
they made it a thing for Secret Wars and only a few other things. So you had your bound collection of Secret Wars on a bookshelf, and that was the beginning of, you go into a bookstore and you would see your comics, you know, a whole, like, row after row of, and this, I'm giving this credit for where that started, because it's evergreen to a point.
Mhm.
Because, and I think that was Jim Shooter's intent, is instead of digging into little continuity tidbits and making everything jive with what was happening in the comics, he made the comics that everybody else was writing jive with this.
Right. And he's the only he's he was known for his ego,
A little
and
bit.
he was known for saying, "I was the only one that could write this. Nobody else could." And
Okay.
I'm
Okay,
sure,
Tim.
yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that rubbed people the wrong way just because of his
Yeah.
personality. But the truth is, he is literally correct, because if you put any other writer on this, no other writer is going to want to play ball and say, like, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to be territorial about their own characters and
Mhm.
not have things dictated to them by this miniseries.
'Cause
But
it's
Jim
like
Shooter was everybody's boss, and so
that's the
eh,
thing. If whoever was writing Iron Man at the time, if you put him on the thing, he's gonna wanna do right by Iron Man.
and he and but also, if he's going to bring in the X-Men writers are gonna balk at that.
And
But
Claremont, I think Claremont was still writing. I'm sure he
yeah,
was.
yes,
He
yes,
was right in the middle. Claremont probably was like, "You're gonna do what
exactly,
with my X-Men?"
exactly. But he couldn't tell Jim Shooter no.
No,
He
exactly.
so I mean, I think Shooter was the only person that could write it, but I'm sure he had a way of reminding everybody of that they
Yeah.
didn't always enjoy. So tell me, like, just kind of wrapping up, like, maybe I'm restating something that we've already said in a different way, but like, when it comes to 1984 in comic books, how large does this series loom?
Oh my gosh. Uh it kind of, even at age 13, and soon to be uh 14. I mean, this was prime comics reading time for me.
Yeah.
And I was discovering, music on the radio, and with my cassette player sitting there with the pause and the record ready to tape stuff, and being mad when the DJ would talk over my stuff.
Oh yeah.
That was 1984 for me. And to get this was maybe the first time this comic was where it was like the comics creators speaking back to us and saying, "You're going to like this because we love it, and here is an expression of our love for this thing that we do." and and even though, because everything has a commercial background,
Mhm.
there's I mean, you
A
hope
commercial motivation. Yeah.
commercial motivation, you hope anything you do makes money.
Sure.
um uh, I certainly hope anything I do makes money.
Well, I mean, at 13, anything Marvel tries, I want them to make money because I want them to keep doing the thing that they're doing. I want
Yes,
to keep buying their stuff.
I want to keep buying everything that Marvel is doing. And this comic, this was another unexpected, another sidebar to this thing, is if all you ever read was Spider-Man comics, you had to get this to see what Spidey was doing, but you're introduced to 28 more characters.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
And
That's true.
same way with X-Men or Avengers. It seemed like even back in the day, Marvel kind of had like
They're very
um,
siloed. Yeah, very
silos.
partitioned. Yeah,
Yeah. So, like, an X-Men fan wasn't necessarily a fan of all of Marvel.
right.
They were a fan of X-Men. But if you had to get the X-Men comics with them in it, you see this and go, well, who is She-Hulk?
Exactly.
Who is Captain America? So it led to, I think, more of a unified theory of Marvel fandom,
Yes.
because everybody had opinions about this comic, and everybody read it for sure. There was nobody amongst the nerds who had not read it, whether you borrowed your uncle's copy like I did, uh, or yeah, everybody had to find out what was happening. And then, of course, in 8 months, the freaking the flip out with the black costume and no
Yeah.
one having any idea, because that, although um I was trying to think of when. So he had been in the costume for 8 months
Yeah.
in real time
In real time.
before
Yeah.
we found out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was another, that was the as I think I've touched on, like you said, I think the drawback was in several cases, whatever they changed at the end of Secret Wars, when it got back home to when the characters got back home to the regular writers, they just in fact, I remember the Iron Man guy took all of Rhodey's new alien armor and
Oh yeah,
just chucked it into the garbage,
yeah,
which of course bit him in the butt later, but still,
yeah, yeah,
come on.
yeah. But we did get the black costume. We did get She-Hulk and Fantastic Four. Those seem to um, stick around for a little while. And
Oh, why? How did I forget that?
yeah,
She-Hulk in the FF, and the
yeah,
thing just stayed on Battle World by himself.
yeah. In his solo
And
book, he continued on. Yeah.
that I reread that recently, and it ended poorly.
Well,
For
I read the John Byrne run on Fantastic Four recently, and yeah, the Fantastic Four, without Sue because she was pregnant actually at the time.
yeah,
The other three go into this contraption and disappear into Secret Wars, and then like either the end of the same issue or the very next issue, they come back and oh, by the way, Ben is not with them, and She-Hulk is wearing a Fantastic Four uniform. You're like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa,
right.
whoa, what just
You're
happened?
like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
And
yeah.
they
So
didn't tell
Secret
you
Wars.
why.
So Contest of Champions was kind of a trial run, kind of a market test. But Secret Wars is that prototype that you look at, that ideal early example of the company-wide crossover.
Mhm.
The success of this series gave birth to that whole trend that's still going on today. You
The
got to
whole
have a
thing.
company-wide crossover. And I loved it. Like you said at the beginning of the show, you want to see all the characters together. You want to let's just celebrate this madness that is the Marvel Universe.
That's the thing. Part of the fun is the universe, the coming together, the continuity, the notion that these guys know each other.
Right.
That's really my favorite thing
Yeah.
about, well, certainly one of my favorite things about comics is the shared universe.
Absolutely.
And in Secret Wars, there were people who met up and hung out and talked who had never done so before. We didn't know if Spider-Man and Wolverine would be pals. They would not,
They
but
would not.
but we didn't know because
Right.
they had never. But throwing all these guys into a situation, all of them together, and then just seeing what happens. I mean, that's good storytelling.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Joe, thank you so much for coming on here and helping me make the case for why 1984 was the best year ever.
Yep.
Tell us, it's free plug time. So put it out there. What you got for people?
Do this on the internet. Type in Spartan Pro Wrestling or American Sci-Fi Classics track, and there you'll find me. SpartanProWrestling.com is where we all the tickets are, and we do free shows. We're a nonprofit, and if you're in the Alabama area, go see a pro wrestling show this weekend. There are independent federations everywhere, and it's somewhat likely that I will be there. And even if you don't come to see me in Gadsden at Spartan Pro Wrestling, come see a pro wrestling show, because it's more prevalent now than when it began in 1984 when Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik.
Awesome. All right, Joe, it has been awesome. Thank you so much. I am sure that I will talk to you again before this series is over, because we lived the best year ever and we understand how good it was. All right, man. I'll talk to you next time, buddy. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Joe, thank you so much. I want everybody out there to join us next week as we keep the calendar right here on January 24th, because that day was huge, not only for comic books, but also in the history of American business and industry. It saw the introduction of a product line that eventually would shape the future of the entire planet. So stay tuned, everybody. The Ministry of Truth is still fact-checking this show for auditory thought crimes. But thanks for spending time with us in 1984.